So first of all, we are now at mission number 4. I just briefly want to go back. And by the way, if I'm not clear, you can feel very free to ask, okay? Okay, let's begin as follows. Let's go back. This is Tools for Life. It's not yet to teach you to keep Shabbos or Yom Tov. It's there to help you transform, all of us, to transform our lives. Let's just go to the first Mishnah for a minute. What did we say about the first Mishnah? Moses received the Torah from Sinai. He gave it to Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the men of the Great Assembly. They said 3 things. Be very patient, speaking to judges, be very patient, uplift everybody, and put a fence around the Torah. What's the takeaway from that for us? We all have to have a dream in life. We have to have a dream, and we have to be very clear what that dream is. And then we need the humility of Moses. We need to have perseverance day and night. We need to stick to our goal and not give it up in the middle. Thirdly, we have to always see the bigger picture. If somebody spills on the table, don't sweat the small stuff. Fourthly, look what happens if you do sweat the small stuff and you have a tantrum at the table because somebody spilled something. What will happen? Your guests will never come back. That's the prophets. And then go make a difference in life. If you have all the knowledge in the world and you're not sharing it, it's not worth anything. If you have all the money in the world and you're not sharing it, not worth anything. What is important? What is important is that you make a difference. And how do you do it? Be patient. Now that doesn't just apply to a judge. It applies to a parent. It applies to somebody running a school. It applies to a business person. You've got to be patient. What does that mean? Every single person has to be looked at as an individual. When it appears to be speaking to a judge, what's it saying to a judge? It's saying to a judge, a judge has a certain arrogance to him. He's very educated, he's highly intelligent, and he might think he knows it all, he's been through the cases. No. Every case is different. Every case is a different background. Be very, very patient. Look at each and every individual as an individual, understanding their circumstances. Now, if you're running a business or whatever, you're supposed to know every single person. You have to be very patient with everybody. And then raise up everybody. What does that mean, raise up everybody? The teacher who doesn't care about the class is not a teacher. The ultimate teacher is somebody who uplifts everybody. The ultimate boss is every single person. He knows everything about the people working for him, and he wants to get the best out of them. He doesn't want to manipulate them. He doesn't want to keep them down. It's not an army. He wants to promote them. He wants to uplift them. And finally, put fences around yourself. A person with fences is a healthy, happy person, because on the one hand, it restricts you, but at the same time, it gives you a certain sense of freedom. And that's first one. Every so often, I'm going to go through the Mishnahs again, that we get it very clear. Then we said you have to have 3 pillars in life. Then last week, we spoke about how you have to serve God, not out of reward and punishment, but you've got to have an intimate, animated relationship with God, love and fear. Somebody who has love, you can see it. You can see enthusiasm. You've got to have love and fear. You can see, if somebody loves his job, you call a painter in to paint the wall. You can see if he loves his job and he loves you, just from the way he's painted it. And you can see if he respects you. Okay. Now we go to the next part of the Mishnah. So the first part of the Mishnah is having a dream and a 5-step program to changing your life. The second is the 3 pillars that you need. The third one is how you serve God. And now what happens in your house. So now we're going out of the individual. What happens in your house? Okay. Yossi, I'm just going to close the door here. Hold on one sec. Okay. Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzareda, Yossi ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim. So these 2 Yossis. Now we're starting a group of pairs. There were 2 leaders. One was the leader of the community, and the other was the head of the court of Jewish law. So from now on, for a whole bunch of generations, for like 200 years, you're going to have 2 leaders leading. Up until the last pair, which is the famous Hillel and Shammai, which we will learn about a little bit later. Okay. So Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzareda. So you have this Yossi ben Yoezer, and he comes from a little dorp called Tzareda. And you have Yossi ben Yochanan, and he comes from Yerushalayim. Kiblu mehem, they received the oral tradition from Antigonus and Shimon HaTzadik. After Antigonus died, they received the tradition from Shimon HaTzadik. And by the way, we can trace the lineage of the Torah all the way from Moses until today. And if I'm not clear, please ask. Yossi ben Yoezer ish Tzareda only. Oh, Yossi ben Yoezer, he says as follows. Have your beischa beis vadle chachomim. Let your house be a meeting place for the sages. Sit in the dust I want to translate it as dust, not dirt, the dust of their feet, and drink, and drink with thirst their words. What does this help me in the year 2021 in this day of February? The truth of the matter, it has everything to do with us. This is unbelievable. This is like the most life-changing Mishnah. It means as follows. The secret to this Mishnah is where Yossi ben Yoezer lived. He lived in a place called Sareda. So he's addressing somebody who doesn't live in Yerushalayim or doesn't live in Crown Heights. He lives in a little dorp. Now, I want you to imagine a dorp 2,000 years ago. Hey? He lives in a far-off town. There's no real communication. So now, what do you do to bring up a happy, healthy family that are going to follow in your traditions? You know what you do? It's all about the ambience in your home. He said like this. You can preach as much as you want to your kids. You can tell your kids whatever you want them to do. You know what they're going to pick up? What's truly important to you. Now, if you're sitting in a far-off town, let's call this town Beaufort West, and you're sitting in Beaufort West, what connection do your kids have with anything? You know what there is, but there's going to be meetings. The sages in the town are going to meet. Make your house the meeting place for the sages. And then don't just give them the keys. Sit in the dust of their feet, which is there are two explanations to that. In the olden days, there were dirt floors. So you sit on the floor, look up to the sages, your kid will see that, number one. Or another thing is when you're running after somebody, the dust of the person in front of you, you get caught up in. So be so enthusiastic to follow these sages and let your kids see that you're following the sages because it's important to you. And drink. So in other words, don't just give them the keys and go to the movies. Sit and listen to what they're saying. Right? And drink with thirst their words. Now, what is that going to do? I want you to picture this in your mind. If your kids see this, your kids will follow in. What it's telling you is what your kids see in the house. If your kids see every night they come home, every night when the parents are sitting at the table, they are speaking badly to everybody, about everybody, the kids are going to speak badly. If the parents are speaking stock market every day, the kids are going to want to become stock market brokers. Whatever it is, whatever's been spoken about genuinely and honestly, the kids are going to pick up. So he's giving you the secret. There can be, all around can be an absolute madhouse in the world. You've got to make your house into the peaceful island that a home has to be. And that's all the ambience on them. And that's what this Mishnah is telling you. I'll tell you an amazing story. There's a story in the Torah that Jacob spends 14 years in yeshiva. And then he goes to get married. He leaves to Iraq to get married. On the way, if you look at the Chumash story, on the way it becomes night and the Torah tells him a stupid information. He goes to sleep, and before going to sleep, he puts stones around his head. Rashi says, why does he do that? To protect himself from wild animals. Now, hold on a minute. If he's worried about, it's in Parshas Vayetzer, if he's worried about wild animals, so put a wall around your whole body. If he wants to rely on a miracle, don't build a wall at all. So what's he saying over here? He's saying over here, so why did he just build it around his head? Because what's he really saying is he wasn't worried about the lions and tigers. That wasn't the issue there. He knew he was entering into the world for the real time. He knew he was going to get married and father the 12 tribes of Israel. He needed to have his head surrounded with stones to protect himself from the wild animals that he was going to counter in life, the sly snakes. The people are going to try to bring him down. And father-in-law was a cheat and a crook who did try to bring him down. He said like this, I'm going to have to encounter them, but my head is going to have a stone wall around it that when I come home from work, I'm going to have a stone wall that my mind is going to be clear, that I'm not going to come home and kick the cat if I've had a bad day. My home is going to have an ambience of love and of warmth and respect. And that's a famous line, by the way, that we all know. Ish and Isha. The Hebrew word for husband and wife. Ish and Isha, they sound the same. There's one not common letter. Yud in the Ish and Hey in the Isha. Ish is husband, Isha is wife. When Yud Hey is in the home, when there's love and harmony, when God is in the home, when there's love, respect, and harmony, it's Ish for Isha, it's a husband and wife. But take out the Yud and take out the Hey. Take out the God from the two names, and you're left with fire, fire consuming. And that's what he's saying over here. Don't worry about what's outside there. The world is a mess sometimes. There's hatred and there's violence and there's all sorts of terrible things. But your house has to have an ambience of warmth and harmony, and your kids will pick it up. And when your kids see love in the home and excitement, so I'll tell you, if you come home from work, or comes Pesach, and you're screaming and shouting about cleaning the house for Pesach, he's going to hate Pesach. It's as simple as that. But if they see you scrubbing it and cleaning it, but there's a joy in it, the kids will pick that up too. And that's what this mission is telling you about. And by the way, what's important about this? It's all free choice what we think. We can change our minds today and change. You know, Jews make a bracha on their shoes every single day. One of the brachas we make in the morning is make a bracha on shoes. So why do we make a bracha on shoes? That's why you don't make that bracha on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, by the way. So one of the explanations is because it's the direction of the shoes today that determine the rest of my life. And if I've been speaking badly, or I've been lashon haroing, or I've been screaming and shouting and performing, I can change it today. And I have the wherewithal to do it. Do I want to do it? 100%. That's what it is. And your practice makes perfect. So let's all take out of the Mishnah. The take out of this Mishnah is you've got to have a happy home, a protected home, an ambience where the kids feel the genuine talk of the parents. That's one. I haven't been getting 10 out of 10 till now. So get 10 out of 10 from now. Now we're going to go to the second Yossi. And the second Yossi is going to teach us something else. The secret is, the first Yossi comes from Sereda, which is Beaufort West. The second Yossi comes from Yerushalayim. Now, anybody who's visited Yerushalayim knows one thing when you go to Yerushalayim. What do you know about Yerushalayim? That Yerushalayim, even if you go today, you go to Mea She'arim or you go to the old city, you see a little kid of 10. They know a fortune. They know an absolute fortune, by the way. You walk in the streets of Yerushalayim, you feel knowledge. You don't need ambience in Yerushalayim. Even today, in Mea She'arim or in Kfar Chabad or in the Shikun Chabad or in the old city, you feel Torah. Just there's a whole bunch of sages. You go to the Wailing Wall, you just feel the knowledge. You see people learning the whole day. So Yossi ben Yochanan was not worried about ambience because there's too much ambience in Yerushalayim. So he was addressing something else that it's a fundamental thing for the future of you, for the future of your family, to make a successful life for yourself and for the Jewish people. And what is that? Let your house be wide open What does that mean? Because Yerushalayim, they weren't worried about ambience, like in Beaufort West, like in Sereda. In Yerushalayim, they were worried about another fundamental thing that has to be instilled in your family, and that is kindness. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you're becoming a God-fearing person and you want to become frum and you want to become learned or you want to grow spiritually, the last thing you want is somebody in your house. Now, I want you to imagine what a house in Yerushalayim looked like when this was written 1,800 years ago. It wasn't like a Santon house. Okay, just imagine, with no bathrooms like they were today. They were very small. You had somebody occupying your home. He disturbed you. But nonetheless, Yerushalayim always had to have visitors because there were pilgrims coming up Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So there was always a need for it. So the Torah says, by the way, it might be, I always say this line, a friend in need is not a friend in need. A friend in need is a pain in the neck. You've got to go occupy your house. It's going to use your bathroom, but that's what it is. That's what the Torah wants you to have. Now, I studied in Crown Heights, and I stayed there for a few years. I was absolutely astounded. Crown Heights is these little attached townhouses like you have in London. And they're very small, but every single week, almost every single family in Crown Heights entertained visitors from all over. And I didn't realize it when I was a student what it must have been like. But every single week, there was no lounge. The dining room lounge were one and just packed with visitors. That's how they lived. That's what the Torah wants you to have. Why? Because one thing, to be frum and not be kind is not being frum. The definition of being frum is care for God's creatures and all of God's creatures. And therefore your house has to be wide open and your kids have to see that. Right? Just before going further, I don't know if I mentioned it. If I did, I'm sorry. But I once read an article about a frum miser, and a beggar came to his home, and he said to him, "Please, I'm starving. Please, can I have something to eat?" And the miser said, "Go get a job." This guy came back. He said, "Please, I'm begging you. I'm starving." He said, "Okay." And he came in, and it's 100 years ago. There was no fridges. And he went to his kitchen. He found an old piece of fish, and he threw it at the guy. He said, "Here's your lunch." And the guy ate the fish. And then the guy got poisoned and he went to hospital. So the miser went to visit him. And then the guy got fish poisoning and he died. So the miser went to the funeral. And then the miser went 2 days later to visit the family, to be Menachem Ovel, to visit the Shiva house, to visit the mourners. And he comes home, this miser, and he says to his wife, "Look how special I am. Look how lucky I am. Through one piece of stinky fish, I did 4 mitzvahs. I fed the poor, I visited the sick, did the mitzvah of going to a funeral, and I did the mitzvah of going to a shiva house. And sometimes people who are growing spiritually can get it all wrong. The key to everything is kindness. And I said it last time. It's more important to be kind than to be right. And that's what he's saying over here. You want to have goodness and kindness. And that's what, if you're living in Yerushalayim where you want to be frummer than everybody else, what does it mean? Your house has to be wide open. And people have to be comfortable in your house. Now, when people are being comfortable in your house, there's 2 different levels of it. Let poor people be comfortable in your house. What does that mean? Hospitality doesn't mean having the rich and famous. Because if the rich and famous are here, having them in your home, it's beautiful to have, but that's not hospitality. That is massaging your ego. When somebody rich and famous comes to town, and they come visit you, and you invite them over, that's purely massaging ego. There's nothing wrong with having them, as long as poor people feel as comfortable in your home as rich people. And I certainly have seen that, by the way. I've seen people who can rub shoulders with the mighty kings and queens, and they can jowl around with everybody. That's what the Mishnah wants you to be. Just be affable with everybody. Let everybody feel comfortable in your house. Okay, now, and that's what you have. Now, why is that so important? Because when your kids see that goodness and kindness, that warmth, that happiness in the home, look at the Mishnah before. The Mishnah spoke about ambience of learning, of knowledge, but as important to that has to be a happy home. And it has to be a warm home. It has to be an exciting home. That's what the Mishnah wants you to have over here. Okay? A kind home. Now, when you are talking about being kind and being hospitable, and I've got to be hospitable to everybody. Now the Mishnah comes and throws a curveball, and a very clever curveball. The Mishnah says as follows, but the Mishnah is very, Yossi ben Yochanan, while on the one hand he's broad-minded, he understands human failings. And he says like this, now guys, if you don't agree with this, you can argue it. But while you're being hospitable, don't go speak too much to the woman. Everybody should feel comfortable, but you don't have to bend over backwards to go overly speak to the woman who come into your house. Let your wife do that. You don't do that. Why? Because in Jewish law, we don't believe in a platonic relationship. Because what happens, there could be weaknesses by some and people could fall. And where does falling start? How does a person land up eating a prawn? Our great-grandparents who came from Lithuania, wherever they came from, they didn't eat prawns and didn't eat cheeseburgers or whatever it might be. How did it happen that they did? It all started from a little thing there and a little thing and a little thing. And the Torah says, by the way, every single human being has weaknesses in them. And so much so that we don't even know what our weaknesses are. And sometimes we're so not in touch, we think we're perfect. And yet at any time, those weaknesses can flare up. And therefore, that, by the way, is the reason at a frum wedding, if there's alcohol flying around, you don't allow men and women to sit together. Because it'll just get out of hand. And about 99% it won't, but maybe there's the 1% that it will. So therefore, don't speak too much to a woman. Now, in Jewish law, there's a time of the month, for a few days in the month, that a husband and wife aren't allowed to be together. Now, in that time, the Torah says an amazing thing. Of course, you've got to respect your wife, and of course, you've got to uplift your wife, but you don't get too cozy. You don't get too intimate with conversation, because you don't know where it's going to go. So even be'ishta omru, in that beautiful time of separation, which leads to an unbelievable closeness afterwards, and as it's always taught, there's a honeymoon and a frum home every 2 weeks, after every 2 weeks. Be'ishta omru, in that time of separation, even then, you have to cut down a little bit of conversation with your wife. And that's why in Jewish law, by the way, in that period of time, when a man's making kid, a husband and wife don't even pass things to each other. Because you just got to keep it separate. So even when it comes to conversation, at that time, you slow down a little bit. Even with your own wife is. How much more so with your friend's wife? And therefore, our sages said a broad-minded thing over there. If a person is, generally speaking, the Torah doesn't like too much conversation. The Torah doesn't like overly glib people who promise a lot and underdeliver. Torah does not like that. The Torah doesn't like people speaking too much, because when you speak too much, you'll either become frivolous, you'll either start being nasty, you'll either start lying. So generally the Torah says contain your words. You see, it'll come up a lot in the Mishnah. A clever person doesn't speak too much. So even with your own wife, you're supposed to slow down. From here, I say just said, anybody's going to speak too much. to women. And by the way, I used to have a function every year. Whenever a comedian didn't think he was being funny on those occasions that had happened almost every year, they would get naughty, they would get dirty, or they would start saying stupid jokes or insult our sponsors or whatever it was. Anybody who speaks too much with women, he causes bad for himself. Because why? There's a magnetic pull. This is what I think the words are. There's a magnetic pull between a man and a woman, right? And what's going to happen? You're going to start talking too much. And you're going to start talking too much. Even if it doesn't get further, it's much more fun to talk to women, to learn. And vice versa. And what's going to happen? You're not going to be learning Torah when you should, which is the most important thing to the world. You're going to be wasting time. And you're going to land up in trouble. So what's the Mishnah saying over there? The Mishnah is saying over there, it's just such a lack of Mishnah like this. On the one hand, be kind, be generous, let everybody be comfortable in your house, but don't ever lose your disciplines. Because if you do, you're going to land up in trouble. And I think the last theme of the Mishnah is that you've got to learn to not speak too much. So I'm going to stop the share here today. And we did learn 2 Mishnayos. And so let's just go and I'll finish with the flow of the book. The flow of the book is as follows. Number 1. The 5 principles, the 5-step program, the 3 pillars. Then how to serve God. You've got to mature. You've got to have a love and fear for God. And now the ambience in your home, the ambience in your home, both if you live in a far out place with regard to learning and with goodness and kindness. The next thing we're going to learn, the next exciting episode, is how you treat your friends and neighbors. But for that, we will see you all next week. In the meantime, I want to wish everybody a good Purim. Remember, you've got to increase in joy. How do you increase in joy? By being confident in Hashem, and He'll look after you. That the little coincidences in life are really miracles. I'm going to keep you 2 more minutes. The difference between Pesach and Purim. Pesach was a splitting of the Red Sea, 10 plagues, 10 commandments been given. The miracle over here was all coincidences, which is in fact a higher miracle. Because God takes the miracle and put it in the laws of nature. If you know the Purim story as well. The king couldn't sleep one night. And how do you do that? How do you celebrate Purim? Number 1, you're joyous. You have to have a meal on Friday morning. Thursday night and Friday, you have to hear the Megillah. That this is not a story of old, it's in our lives. You have to give 2 edibles to at least 1 friend, and you have to give a bit of charity to 2 poor people. That's all about goodness and kindness. So let's do it. See you all next week, Tuesday. I will have my Zoom fixed up by then. Have a good week and a happy Purim.